Okay, so what I'm going to do is explain the format of the chart. Why is it shaped the way it is, and why are things laid out according to the way they are? Previously, I addressed the very top line, which is English letters, which are for the sake of reference. So those of you who speak English can say, oh, there's an A that lines up with the Aleph. Now I know that Aleph is not some strange sounding word that I have no connection to. It is the equivalent of the English A. And if somebody says kuf as compared to kaf, and I try to make a very clear distinction, some people just say kof or kof. It's like, what? Was that the K or the Q? And for example, the leader of the country of Libya named Gaddafi, sometimes you'll see it written with a K and sometimes with a Q. Well, which is it? If you're just going phonetically, it really doesn't matter because it's simply phonetics. But if you go with the letters mean something, then it all matters, a big deal. So kuf sounds like the letter Q, which is our letter Q, which is towards the end of the alphabet here, which is this letter here. And you could see the similarity to the letter Q versus the kaf, which is this letter here, our letter K, which is right before the letter L, which is an open hand. And if you like the fingers, see, the thumb and the four fingers, if you know the difference between what the letter Q represents and what the letter Kaf represents, you won't make the mistake. But I've seen, for example, the word Kadesh spelled with a K, but it's actually with a Q. It's actually with the letter Kuf. If you spell it with the K, you've missed the whole point. And so it makes me wonder, the people who transliterate from Hebrew to English and use the K, do they have any idea what they're doing? Apparently not. Because if they put a value on what they were doing, they would have never used the K. They would have made it with a Q. You can say, well, in English, you got to have a QU. You can't. It's like, that doesn't matter. It's the phonetics. And so what I've tried to do is specifically use the letters that were appropriate. So whenever there's a kadosh, which is kuf, dalet, shin, Q, D, S, H. And I wouldn't put in the other, you might say the vowels in English. It's like I wouldn't spell it Q-O-D-E-S-H, because then you are training your brain to think in English of, oh, it's Kodesh, and it's like, well, there's no O and there's no E. You could spell it, you could throw a Vav in there, so it's Kuf Vav Dalet Shin. But the point is, if you train your mind to learn Hebrew, just write the English phonetical letters. Problem is with something like TH and SH, there's those secondary letters. And one other thing to make a distinction, which is on the chart, which might confuse people, but I did it for a reason, again, to make a distinction. In English, there's a problem with the spelling of the word Hanukkah. Sometimes it's spelled with a C, and sometimes it's with a H or a CH. It's like, which is it? Now, if it's just phonetic, doesn't matter. However, the letter is the het, which is here. It's not the kaf, well, it wouldn't be Hanukkah, or the C or ha, but what about the H? What letter is an H? Well, the letter H is actually the 8th letter in the English alphabet, and it sounds like this letter het, kinda, it's a CH, but the 8th letter het is in the same position. The problem is the letter hey, which is the 5th letter, our letter E, sounds like an H. So now you have, as a matter of fact, on Todd Bennett's book, you'll see that, sorry Todd, but you got to correct the mistake. He wrote Yod Het Vav Het instead of Yod Hey Vav Hey, because in his book, in the book of Messiah, it's like, did somebody not know? Well, it sounds like an H, that's the 8th letter, so it must be a het. No, it's not a het, it's a H, it's a hey. So again, it's like, what is it? In English, the word E almost shaped like this letter E, but it's pronounced ha, which means the. That's our letter H. It's spelled H-A in English transliteration. So what I'm saying is that you might sit there and say, boy, this is really confusing, but it really isn't. If you tell yourself it's confusing, you'll say, step back. It's just, that's too much. But if you go, this is really simple, what we're trying to do is unravel the knot of entangling, which has happened over the last couple, 2,000, 3,000 years. And there was a reason for the knot of entangling. And I'm digressing here, but I want to make a point by mentioning the knot of entangling. I'm not going to draw a very good picture of it, but I'm going to draw you a picture of kind of sort of the general motif of a Celtic knot. A Celtic knot will have these kind of patterns of woven together, artistically done, but basically there's no beginning and there's no end. It's a pattern of confused weavings and entangling. And this is what's known as Celt or Celtic. That's kind of an English. Okay, so here's an interesting thing, and I heard somebody say, that's not the way it works, but I'm just going to show you something. The Hebrew letter, the third letter, is a gimel, which is a C. The third letter in English. In the modern, remember this is the camel, the head and the neck of the camel, the modern letter gimel is the letter with a foot. It's the same shape, but it has a foot. Why? Because it's the letter that wanders, that walks around, that goes back and forth. It's the letter. Okay, we mentioned before in the paleo letters last time that there's a similarity between a gimel and a lamed. Here's a gimel, and here's a lamed. Or more specifically, there's a gimel, and kind of like that's a lamed. But the point is, can you see a rolling, It's moving, it's rolling. And if you look at the word gimel lamed, it means a bowl or a sphere or something round or like a revolving door. And a revolving door, if you looked at here's the axis of the door, like at the airport, and they have these things, and you go in, it spins you around, and if you get caught in the revolving door, it might just throw you back out, right? I say that for a reason. It's in Psalms 119. The point is, it's also a lever. What's a lever? A lever is, you're on some kind of a teeter-totter thing with a fulcrum point, and if you press down here, this is going to go flying up there. The gimel lamed is this concept of because of this, then that. So here you have this action, and then you have that action. So this gimel lamed is this reciprocal rolling, cause and effect. In Hebrew, there's two ways to provide a plural. Like in English, if you're going to pluralize something, you add either an es or you add an s. In Hebrew, if you're going to pluralize a word, you can add a yod mem or you can add a vav tav. This is pronounced im, kind of like y, m. Of course, we're reading that direction, right? Right to left. And vav tav is pronounced ot. Now, if you take gimel lameds, which are those that were walking and wandering, and you say, well, who's the gimel lameds? Gaul. Well, there's a place called Gaul, basically France. There's a place called Gaul, like Galatia, the Galatians. But the Gaul were the people who of Israel profaned the covenant and were sent packing. They were kicked out of the land at the time of Yahweh's punishment, his reprisal, for them betraying the covenant with treachery, profaning it, abusing it, squandering it, and he just kicked them out and he said, here's your curse. You will wander the earth. I gave you the straight yeshar truth, emet, yeshar emet, the straight truth, the path, the derek, and you didn't want the straight truth on the path, the yeshar emet of the derek, so here's your curse. You can get what you want. You're going to wander the earth with confused, tangled path of no beginning and no end that you can see. You'll be completely bewildered with finding no way home, which looks just like the Celtic knot. And the letters C is the same as a G, the L is the lamed, and then the OT, you have gimel lamed vav tav, which is galut. The OT is the same as UT, so the gimel lamed vav tav galut is essentially the foolish wanderings that were dispersed of Israel, sent to wander the earth, not coming back until the time of the end of the curse, 2010, at which time they will find their way home to walk again the straight path of Yahweh. So the Celts, you could say, with their artistry of their Celtic knot, is a picture embedded of their own curse that Yahweh gave to the people of Israel. Who are the Celts? Well, for the most part, the people of the Celts were various tribes that lived in Western Europe and England, Scotland, Ireland, where most people think that's where the dispersed tribes of Israel settled, according to Stephen Collins, author from South Dakota, amongst others, Yovar Davidi and all. We've got to try to keep on track here for the sake of this, but go ahead.
You started on Hanukkah, and I got lost somewhere in there. Did you finish?
Hanukkah starts with a CH, and so thank you for bringing me back to that. That's really important. What I've done for the sake of the chart is, because this just isn't erasing, because the letter chet is this guttural sound, how do you draw that letter? It's not a CH, that sounds like Chuck, like we're in Chuck E. Cheese's parking lot, that's a CH, but it's not Chanukah. So how does one describe a CH? I have a dictionary where they wrote a C with a kind of an X, and so I thought, that's pretty good, because CX isn't really a letter. So on the chart, I've written C capital with an X for, so it's Samech. So if you look down here under the Samech, you'll see a CX. So for Hanukkah, or anything written with a chet, I'll call it the CX sound, because there's really no better way that I could see to describe it. And if you see something which is the H, it's pronounced like the letter Hey. And the K is pronounced as the Kaf, and the Kuf, the letter Q. Okay. Going back then to the format of the chart. Starting off at the top in English so that we have a reference for where we are. Each letter is essentially, if you can read from top all the way to the bottom, is the essence or the meaning of each individual letter. There's 22 letters in Hebrew, starting at the right, reading to the left. The equivalent in English is the letter A, so everything from the very top all the way down to this bottom row of color, which is just a reference because the color breaks. It's a reference to everything regarding the letter Aleph. So forth and so on all the way across. The reason why the letter Aleph is in white and the letter Tav is in white, you'll notice the similarity on this chart here. Aleph and Tav are in white, and then there's an array of color, a spectrum of colors to the other letters. It's because white light contains all the colors. When all the colors are put together, they look like white light. If you hold up a prism, the various frequencies of the wavelengths of the different colors are broken up into this, you might say, a spectrograph, where now you can graphically see, which is what a rainbow is. So what you're seeing is the distinction of the different frequencies of they're actually like vibrations of light, but it's broken up into the integral elements that are contained within the all-inclusive white light. So Aleph contains all the other letters. It's like, I've heard it called Russian dolls, where they'll have one big container, like an egg or a box, or you open that up and there's another one, you open that up and another one, you open that up and another one. That's the way the alphabet kind of works. So Aleph, everything's in the Aleph and the Tav. So they're written in white, like white light, and then here's this like rainbow colors of all the other letters. The reason for the stripes on the page, first of all, it's practical. You've got an easy way to render all the letters. Second of all, Joseph was given the coat of many colors, and if you read it about, it was actually a tunic, or it means these long stripes, and he was given that, and so this long coat of striped colors has some reference to Joseph, which is the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh. Jacob said, these two sons of Joseph will be mine, and we'll give them equal share of the inheritance. And it was the, you might say, the flagship tribe of the northern kingdom was Ephraim. And so when you regard Ephraim, you're rendering the Joseph, which is the northern kingdom of Israel. And so this chart is a call, a shofar call for Ephraim to come back to the covenant. So the stripes are calling, if you can hear it, the shofar to Ephraim. That's one of the subtleties of what's in here. Why this color array, and why is it, here's 3 blues, 2 purples, 2 reds, and everything else is a individual sequence of the primary and secondary color wheel? It's because, coming down here to this section. So this is the top. I'm going to come down to the heart of it, and then we'll go back and explain what this is here. The Mishkan is the word in Hebrew. The root of the word is shakan, which is where you get Shekinah. Breaking that down is you got shin kaf, which is shack. It's a place of neighborly dwelling, like going to the local tavern, the watering hole. You know, whether it's the coffee shop or the beer pub, it's the local watering hole. The word in Greek for tavern, taverno, is the same as this word, shin kaf, neighborly shack. It's all the same word, which is where we get tabernacle, which is why the tabernacle, coming out of Greek taverno, same as tavern, same as sukkah. So the festival of sukkahs in the fall, the 7th month, the 15th day for 8 days, 7 days, everybody's supposed to live in these shacks they make out of twigs and branches, which is in the Torah. That's a whole other matter to discuss. But the point is, in the Mishkan, mem as a prefix meaning the place of, so the place of shacking, living together, dwelling, neighborly, Shekinah, who's revealed from shacking together. Shekinah glory is the glory then of Yahweh abiding, neighboring with his people at the Mishkan. It's not a name. It's a description of the, like Mr. Rogers, you know, I want to be your neighbor concept. That's what Shekinah literally means. So the Mishkan is the place where he visited with his people. Mishkan, tabernacle. The Mishkan had a big white fence. It was like, I think it was like about 50 feet by 100, or 70 feet by 150 feet roughly, a big white linen fence, and there was 3 embroidered colors. Blue, purple, and red on the white linen, and there was gold threads. And outside the Mishkan was the darkness of the wilderness. The Mishkan, when there was the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, above the Ark of the Covenant, the big white linen fence would have been lit like a lampshade, because it was about 9 feet tall or so, and if you're back from it, it would just be kind of backlit. Why the blue, purple, red with white linen? 20-something times in the book of Leviticus, every time it mentions the embroidered colors, it's always the same pattern. On the priest garments and on the embroideries of the veil inside the set-apart place, the kadosh place, and also on the outside of the fence. And so I was thinking, why these colors? Because he keeps mentioning it, it wasn't just a random order, it was always the same order. Blue, purple, red with white linen. I was thinking, could that mean something? What do you think of with blue? Well, we were told to wear blue threads in the zitziot to remember that Yahweh made this place and he gave us instructions. So blue is like, oh, there's a creator who made this place, he's the authority, and he gave us the instructions. When Moshe saw him in 70 elders and had basically, you know, you might say they ate and drank. Some say, well, they had like a picnic lunch up there on the throne room floor, and others say, well, no, that just means they didn't die. But nevertheless, there's a picture of this sapphire floor. Well, sapphires can be other colors, but we think sapphire blue. So if his throne room floor is like blue pavement and blue the color of the zitziot, techelet blue, which is to say, I'm the guy that made this place, I am the Yod, the hand Yod, the creator. These are my ways. I determined the design. I determined how everything works. I'm the guy you reference when you think, what do I do now? Look to the yod. That's like the color blue. When you see blue, oh, blue tzitzi thread, do what he says. So blue lines up with yod. Well, you notice it lines up with het, tet, and yod. There's a reason for that. The reason is the colors of the embroidery were on the gate of the Mishkan. Well, the gate of the Mishkan, the fence, is the meaning of the letter het. It's a fence. Tet is a seal, it's a full basket, and it's kind of like I'm the authorized signatory. I'm the owner. This is my brand. What's Yahweh's brand? He says Yod He Vav He back in Exodus 3 when Moses said, who are you? Eya Asher Eya. But Yod He Vav He is my memorial name. Yod He Vav He is my name of remembrance. Yod He Vav He is my brand, my logo. This is how you'll recognize me, and you'll hand it down from generation to generation. He didn't say Yahweh is my name or the name of the Father. He didn't say that. That's what he's been pegged with, but there's a whole other discussion there. He said Yahweh is my logo brand, and you could say, well, you put your name on your house door. You might say you address your letters with your name. So if he was to put his name on the door of his Mishkan, of the door of his castle, and the door of his house there, if he were to write his name, he's got these four colors, blue, purple, red with white linen. Could that stand for Yod He Vav He? Blue, Yod, the color of the Creator, the guy who made this place. He, the expression of the Creator, which is the Torah, which is his royal decrees. That's kind of like purple, right? The royal color. Vav, the man. Red, Adam, red blood, the man who poured out his blood, Yeshua, or Yahusha. Lou White talks about that. There's different ways to pronounce it. That's another matter. Blue, purple, red, the Creator, the Torah, the sent one, the Mashiach, Yeshua. And then what is Hey? Yeshua said, hey, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to send you the Ruach, the Comforter, to lead you in the ways of truth. So could white represent the ways of the truth? What are the ways of the truth? Well, white linen, which is what this was, always speaks of righteousness. What's righteousness? A man doing the ways of the truth, which is the Torah commandments. Well, the first hay, the purple of the Torah commandments, is the same then as the hay, the picture of white robes of righteousness, the white linen, which is the man doing the ways of righteousness, which are exact copy of the purple of the Torah instructions of the royal decrees of Yahweh the Creator, that Yeshua, the Vav man, was the example of in human form. So as a model of blue, purple, red, white, blue, purple, red with white linen with a thread of gold is the reason for this color pattern here. Simply then, as an extension, blue, purple, red is the blue is a primary color, purple a secondary, red a primary, and if you roll out the color wheel, both sides, you end up with these other color patterns, which is why those are there. But that's why there's 3 blues, 2 purples, 2 reds, because what I found according to the Mishkan pattern, which is on the other DVDs, we won't go there now, but Mem and Nun are that color the third day, the third festival, Shavuot. Mem and Nun are the red. Kaf and Lamed are the purple. Het, Tet, Yod, the kingdom of the name of the Creator, is the blue, which is the fence. And you might say, well, did I just make this up? There's a pattern here, and the application of the pattern seems to fit. For 5 years, I've tried to find ways to break this pattern, to prove this pattern untrue, or to find other patterns that work. And I'll tell you, this gets more and more solid the more I try to find ways to break it. So you could say, well, if it was simply every individual letter represented an individual thing, that would have been an easy code to break. Is this a code? Is this a code that Yahweh plugged in there, which if you see that these 3 represent this, that these 2 that, these 2 that, and then it's 1, 1, 1, 1, it works. We could discuss it on another time, why it works or if there's something else about it, but just simply to identify what this is, that's what it is. That's the pattern, that's the code, and I believe that when Yahweh said to Moshe, I showed you this pattern, and the word for pattern is down here on the chart, but we'll get to that later. Model, paradigm, formation, Tav, Bet, Nun, Tav, Yod. Bet Nun is that word ben or bean then, which has to do with contemplating the pattern or making it like the pattern. Taben is the word for pattern. The Mishkan pattern. This is pictographically the Mishkan pattern. Outside the fence, the place of the red heifer sacrifice, the place that Yahusha was crucified, outside the fence, in the darkness, in the wilderness, in the face of his enemies, in the face of those who didn't care, so that those who would care could get into the kingdom. He was the Zion Vav, the man who was put to the weapon, the man who met his edge, his end, his cut off, so that we could enter the Chet. He was then the drawbridge laid down over the Zion. The Vav is a connector, a drawbridge is like the connector. So he, the Vav man Zion, Vav ben Yosef, a common man who was misunderstood, misaligned, misappropriated, destroyed, beaten, thrown in the dungeon, just like Joseph, the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis, as compared to the Resh man, Ben David, two picture types of the one we hope to have, the Mashiach, the coming, the sent one. Messiah ben Yosef, Messiah ben David, the model of the common man who struggles outside the kingdom, has the weapon put to him, but he was also the drawbridge over the moat so that we could enter the kingdom. Here's another model, Chet being though like a tomb, Yeshua put to the weapon, was thrown into a tomb and sealed. The Tet is basically like a seal thrown onto the stone, the sealing stone, thrown in front of the grave. But he himself said, don't blame the Jews for this. Don't blame the Romans for this. I'm doing it. Yod is to say, I'm doing it. Aleph as a prefix also says, this is what I will do. Because you can read a word in Hebrew, Aleph is a prefix meaning I will, and Yod meaning this is mine. You can say everything between here and here is what he says he's going to do by his own volition, if you know how to read that word. And it just so happens that Bet Gimel Dalet is the word bagged, where we get the word baggy, which is baggy, loose-fitting clothing that you can't see the true shape of, so it also means disguised and camouflaged. Hey is to reveal, or what looks like. When you say the, you're pointing at something like an arrow that's lit up, which is why this picture down here is like an arrow lit up under the hay that looks like a man. So here, I will materialize myself, come to earth, Dalet, four corners, 4 seasons. Dalet speaks of earthiness. I will materialize myself, give myself a foot to come walk the earth, which is the garden villa, as it were, of Yahweh's own design, disguised, but looking like a man who would be put to the weapon, entombed, and sealed, all of my own volition. And it's like, did I just make that up? Now, the interesting thing is, this almost sounds like Christianity. But it's not. This is not Christianity. The interesting thing about this is that the premise of why we're studying this language is that this language predates the creation of the world. It predates the first Christian. It predates Abraham, Noah, Moses, or anybody who might be rendered as the preeminent Jew. This is not Jewish. This is not Christian. This is not even human. The reason I say it's not human goes back to the meaning of the word kadosh. We talked about that earlier.